The old woman had been dead for 30 years. So when Mara saw her standing between the graves, smiling, she told herself it was just a shadow. But shadows don't wave, and they don't know your name. If this story already has your heart pounding, you are exactly where you need to be. Like this story, share it with someone brave enough to read it alone, and subscribe to the channel because what comes next is far darker than anything you have faced before. Don't say we didn't warn you. Mara Ellison had never wanted to go back to Harrow Hill. The old family property sat at the edge of a dying town in rural Virginia, surrounded by pine trees so tall they blocked the sun even on the brightest afternoons. The house itself was falling apart, its white paint peeling like sunburned skin, its windows dark and hollow. But the worst part of the property was not the house. It was the cemetery behind it. 12 begrabes, all bearing the last name Ellison, stretching back 200 years. 12 graves her grandmother had tended every single week until she died. Mara was 19 now, and she had come back only because her mother had asked her to. There was paperwork to sign, things to sort through, and a house that needed to be sold. Her mother, Claire, was too sick to travel. So Mara came alone, with a single bag, a charged phone, and the quiet belief that she would be done in 3 days. She was wrong about the 3 days. She was wrong about a lot of things. The first night, she slept in her grandmother's old room because it was the only bed that still had clean sheets. The smell of lavender was still there, faint but real, like a memory pressed into the fabric. She fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the drive, but she woke up at exactly 2 in the morning. She did not know why. She just opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling, and something in her chest felt tight and cold, like a hand had reached inside her and squeezed. She heard it then, a sound from outside. Soft at first, almost like wind moving through leaves, but the night was completely still. She sat up and listened harder. It was rhythmic, steady, like someone digging. Mara went to the window. The cemetery was maybe 40 feet from the back of the house, separated by a small patch of dead grass. There was no moon, but the sky was clear and the stars gave just enough light for her to see the shapes of the headstones. And between 2 of them, near the back row, she saw something moving. A dark shape, low to the ground, rocking back and forth with slow and deliberate purpose. She told herself it was an animal. A deer, maybe. Or a large dog. She almost believed it. Then the shape stood up. It was tall, human, and it turned toward the house slowly, as if it already knew she was watching. Mara stepped back from the window. Her heart was slamming in her chest. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it at the glass. The shape was gone. Nothing stood between the graves except darkness and stone. She did not sleep again that night. In the morning, she walked to the cemetery because she needed to prove to herself that she was being irrational. She pushed through the old iron gate, which creaked horribly, and walked the rows of graves one by one. Most were old, the names barely readable, through years of moss and weather. Thomas Ellison, Ruth Ellison, baby girl Ellison, 1891. She reached the back row where she had seen the shape. She stopped. The ground in front of one of the graves was disturbed. The dirt looked freshly turned, soft and dark compared to the hard earth around it. The headstone in front of it read a name she recognized immediately. Eleanor Ellison. Her great-grandmother, dead since 1993. Mara crouched down and looked at the dirt more carefully. There were marks in it. Not from a shovel. They were long and thin, like fingers. Like something had been pressing up from underneath, pushing against the soil from below, like something had been trying to get out. She stood up fast, her legs suddenly shaking, and that was when she noticed the flowers. Fresh white flowers had been placed on Eleanor's grave. Not wilted, not dry, fresh, as if they had been laid there that very morning. Mara had not brought flowers. There was no one else on the property. There was no one else for miles. She walked back to the house quickly, and she called her mother. Her mother S's voice was weak on the phone but grew sharp the moment Mara mentioned Eleanor S's grave. "Stay away from that cemetery," Claire said. Her tone was not worried. It was frightened. deeply and completely frightened. "Mara, I need you to listen to me. Do not go back there at night, and whatever you hear, whatever you think you see, do not follow it." Mara asked her mother what she was talking about. Claire was quiet for a long moment. Tense aside, Grandma wrote letters before she died. "I never showed you. I thought it was just an old woman losing her mind. But she wrote that something in that cemetery was waking up. She wrote that Eleanor never really rested, that Eleanor made a deal a long time ago and the land remembers it." Mara felt cold all over. "What kind of deal?" But her mother had already started coughing badly, and the call dropped before she could answer. That afternoon, Mara searched the house for the letters her mother had mentioned. She found them in a box in the attic, tied together with kitchen string, written in her grandmother's careful handwriting. She sat on the dusty attic floor and read them one by one in the pale light coming through the single small window above her. What she read made her stomach turn. According to the letters, Eleanor Ellison had buried something beneath her own grave, not just a body. Something else. Something she had carried with her from the old country when the family first came to Virginia 2 centuries ago. Her grandmother wrote that Eleanor believed the land needed to be fed, that the roots of the old oak tree at the edge of the cemetery were connected to all 12 graves, that they had grown through the coffins over the years, and that the tree fed on what was buried there. And in return, it kept the family safe. It kept illness away, kept crops growing, kept the cattle healthy. For generations, no Ellison had died young. No Ellison had ever suffered much. And Mara had always thought that was just luck. The last letter was different from the others. It was shorter. Just 3 lines. Her grandmother had written it in a shaking hand, the letters barely holding their shape. It said, "Eleanor is asking to come back. The roots are pulling. Someone new must make the promise, or everything she took will be returned. The sickness, the loss, the grief, it will all come back." Starting with Claire. Mara sat very still for a long time. Her mother was sick. Had been sick for months. Doctors could not explain it. She thought about that now in a way she had refused to think about it before. She went outside as the sun began to set. She stood at the edge of the cemetery and looked at the old oak tree. Its roots had pushed up through the ground, all around the graves, thick and dark, running between the headstones like veins. She had not noticed that before. She walked closer. The bark of the tree was deeply carved, not by Nieves, but by roots that had grown in on themselves, forming patterns that almost looked like faces, almost looked like names. Then she heard a name, spoken clearly, from somewhere beneath the ground. Mara spun around. The cemetery was empty. The evening was completely silent. Then the dirt above Eleanor's grave began to move, slowly, the way it had looked that morning. Except now, she was watching it happen. The soil shifted and parted, gently, like a breath moving through it, and from beneath the surface a single pale hand pushed upward, fingers spreading wide, reaching toward the sky. Mara ran. She ran back to the house and locked every door. She grabbed her bag and her keys. She made it all the way to her car before she stopped. Her phone was lighting up with calls from her mother's hospital. She answered with a shaking hand. The nurse's voice was calm but careful. Her mother had taken a sudden turn. Her heart was weakening. They did not understand why. She needed to come as soon as possible. Mara stood in the driveway with the night closing in around her, and the oak tree looming at the edge of her vision. She understood then what the letters had meant, what the choice was. Leave and lose her mother, or stay and make the promise. She turned around slowly and walked back toward the cemetery. The hand above Eleanor's grave had disappeared back into the soil. But the ground was still soft, still waiting. And as Mara stepped through the iron gate, she felt the roots beneath her feet shift and curl, wrapping gently around the soles of her shoes, welcoming her home. She knelt down beside the grave and pressed both palms flat into the cold earth. She did not know the words, but the roots did. They moved up through her fingers like something alive, and the oak tree shuddered in the windless night. Far away, in a hospital 200 miles from Harrow Hill, a monitor stopped its alarm and a woman breathed easy again. And in the cemetery, a new name began to grow slowly into the bark of the old oak tree. Mara Ellison, not carved, grown, as if it had always been there, as if the roots had been waiting for her all along. The house sold the following spring. The new owners loved everything about it, except the cemetery, except the tree, except the way their youngest daughter sometimes stood at the gate in the dark, whispering to something beneath the ground that whispered back,